News. It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Beirut, our top story. Israel warns it's preparing for a possible ground invasion of Lebanon to take on Hezbollah. It comes after Hezbollah targeted Tel Aviv with a ballistic missile for the first time. British citizens are told to leave Lebanon, but tell Sky News they can't find a way out. Tonight, we report from across the region as the prospect of an all-out war comes closer.
Also ahead on Sky News at 10, Sir Keir Starmer tells Sky News why he accepted a gift of accommodation worth £20,000. Post Office campaigner Sir Alan Bates threatens to sue the government as he receives his knighthood. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Good evening from Beirut. I'm Yalda Hakim, and here in Beirut, hopes of a peaceful resolution to the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah have now all but faded. Israel today revealed that it's preparing for a possible ground invasion of Lebanon, warning that it intends to destroy Hezbollah. Earlier, Hezbollah fired a ballistic missile towards Tel Aviv for the first time. And throughout the day, the two sides have again exchanged fire across the border, with Lebanese officials saying 51 people have been killed. Israel is warning that its airstrikes will continue ahead of that possible ground invasion, and Israeli jets have struck more than 2,000 targets over recent days. Israel says it wants to stop Hezbollah missile attacks. This map shows the scale of air raid alerts across Israel. They've been issued on average every 4 minutes since Sunday, although most projectiles were intercepted. Today, Israel destroyed a ballistic missile aimed at Hezbollah at the headquarters of the Mossad intelligence agency just north of Tel Aviv. Tonight, we will bring you reports from across the region with our special correspondent Alex Crawford in southern Lebanon and our international correspondent John Sparks in Beirut. But our first report comes from our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes in Tel Aviv as Israel prepares for what could be its second ground war inside 12 months.
Israel's military chief preparing his troops for a possible ground invasion of Lebanon after days of airstrikes.
You will go in, destroy the enemy there, and decisively destroy their infrastructure. These are the things that will allow us later to return the residents of the north safely.
Hezbollah, backed by Iran, is also escalating. Here, Israeli air defences shoot down the first ever Hezbollah missile fired towards Tel Aviv. But Israel appears undeterred. We're shown one of the reasons why. This air defence system is armed and ready for action. Israel knows that its expanded operation against Hezbollah raises the risk of more missiles being fired from Lebanon towards Tel Aviv. There's also the possibility of Iran once again launching strikes. Yet this analyst doesn't believe Hezbollah or Iran want a wider conflict. It's perhaps why Israel is daring to strike so hard and so fast into Lebanon.
Both Iran and Hezbollah does not want a full-scale war because they are afraid of the consequences of such a war. That will destroy Lebanon, that the Iranian will have to be directly involved, and they don't want to be involved. They have their own problems. They just want to use Hezbollah for their own interests.
But this is a huge gamble, with Tel Aviv in the firing line. Tyre heard the air raid siren when Hezbollah launched its early morning missile.
We were woken up, we were startled, but I'm uncomfortable saying I was scared compared to what people in northern Israel are going through. I hope there will be an end to all this mess, to all the threats.
For now, though, the cycle of violence is quietly accepted in a country that feels it has no choice but to fight. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Tel Aviv.
Well, with neither side, Israel nor Hezbollah, backing down, there's now a race against time for civilians in southern Lebanon to flee this conflict. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford is in Tyre in the south of the country and has been speaking to those caught in the crossfire.
South Lebanon is being hammered by Israeli airstrikes. There are a few places here where residents feel safe now.
Great.
A residential block on the outskirts
great.
of Tyre still burning as we turn up. It's one of hundreds attacked by Israeli forces during another intense day of bombing. The Israeli army chief says strikes like these are preparations for a possible ground assault into Lebanon.
Allahu Akbar.
Rhetoric or not, for residents in places like Nabatir, the war is all around. They targeted right next to us, he's saying. And this is the second. And this is the third. The emergency services are struggling to keep pace. There's no let-up in the airstrikes, the killing, wounding and terror. There are yet more fleeing. We'll be back, he's shouting. This area was considered safe just a few days ago.
We're still seeing lots of people on the move. There is a huge migration of people out of the area that's being targeted by the Israelis, and all along we're seeing evidence of airstrikes. The whole area around here is peppered by them.
Rare strikes too in the mountains north of the capital. This was Maasera, and a senior Hezbollah cleric was killed here, according to Lebanese news outlets. But the strikes here sparked yet more concern that the bombing is fast spreading across the country. Hezbollah is being relentlessly pursued, but it's coming at a cost to civilians who are in the way. Whole families are missing, with little time to search. And these two little sisters are among the dozens killed in another deadly day for the country. As parts of Lebanon came under sustained attack, Hezbollah's refusing to back down, claiming to fire its first ballistic missile at intelligence headquarters near Tel Aviv, which was intercepted by the Israelis. The ever-escalating situation is causing a growing humanitarian crisis, with hundreds of schools turned into shelters and thousands reliant on scarce aid.
They are traumatized. They lost their house. They saw some of their house being burned. They lost their income. They lost many things.
Lebanon's Social Affairs Minister didn't want to talk to us about it, nor to those in the shelter. He was heckled by those who've recently fled their homes and feel they're getting no help. They're not listening to us, she tells us. Everyone's just looking after themselves. We don't have mattresses, covers or pillows, and our children are sleeping on the ground. One traumatized mother said she'd fled with her 5 children hours earlier. There's a lot of destruction. People died, houses got destroyed, the roads were blocked, she said. There's no more bread, no more food, no more water. The situation is grim for these people, and there are tens of thousands like them, and feeling they, not only Hezbollah, are suffering under the Israeli bombardment.
They're not differentiating between fighters and civilians. This aggression is intensely hitting civilian areas. They're not differentiating at all.
But the Israeli airstrikes are going on through much of the night as well as the day now. This was close to the Lebanese-Italian hospital. And there's no end in sight to this right now. Alex Crawford, Sky News in southern Lebanon.
Well, the UK is accelerating plans to evacuate British nationals from Lebanon, saying the time is to leave and it's now. While some flights are still operating in and out of Lebanon, the Foreign Office is preparing to evacuate Britons from Lebanon to nearby Cyprus, should that change. 700 additional troops are being sent to Cyprus as the UK bolsters its presence alongside the RAF Akrotiri base. The extra troops join the logistics support ship RFA Mounts Bay and HMS Duncan Air Defence Destroyer, with aircraft and transport helicopters on standby. Our international correspondent, John Sparks, is in Beirut and has been speaking to some of those trying to leave the country.
The highway north to the capital may be full of people trying to flee. But Beirut's international airport was uncharacteristically quiet. Most flights have already been cancelled. Most airlines have decided to stay well clear. A valid outbound ticket is a precious thing indeed.
The situation is just not safe. As much as we want to stay, as much as this is our home, as much as some people don't have a choice, there's not much else we can do. It's unpredictable.
The majority here were Lebanese, but there were British nationals too. Maher Ali, wearing red, lives in North London. He'd just been to see his parents in South Lebanon.
What did you see? What did you experience?
Well, explosion everywhere. It's just been hitting, and I can hear them all day, all night long. Since 2 days, we have to, myself and some part of my member of my family, we have to escape from south toward Beirut.
Mr. Ali came because his mother was unwell.
I've been here only 12 days. Yeah, so I knew, I didn't know it was gonna hit that bad, but I knew there are war, but there are situations, some people, they have to come and check families. It's not holiday, you got me, it's an emergency.
The British Prime Minister is worried. Leave Lebanon immediately, he says, but it's not so simple for some. In Beirut's southern suburbs, we found the telltale signs of war. This Range Rover repair shop was flattened overnight. Briton Malhassan Al-Dada lives nearby.
Nice to meet you.
The mother of 2 is from Manchester. Her husband is Lebanese.
Okay.
Last night was very bad, the sounds were non-stop, the bombs, and we could see actually from there, you could see the flames going up.
Malhassan wants to take her children back to Britain. Problem is, she doesn't know how.
So I thought I might as well just take them and leave. So I've been trying all day to find tickets, and there's no commercial flights, everything's gone.
She has called the Foreign Office for travel advice, but it wasn't reassuring.
I was hoping that they would be a bit more of help, That's what I thought, that, you know, like the movies, they'd come and pick you up or something. And it's not that way at all. They just say there's nothing that they can do.
Making the decision to leave is one thing. Finding a way to do it, another. But it's now a necessity for many in Lebanon as this country hurtles into war. John Sparks, Sky News in Beirut.
Well, let's speak now to our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, who joins us live now from Tel Aviv. And Deborah, I mean, there's a lot of concern here tonight about this language of around a possible ground invasion into Lebanon. Is this a matter of when and no longer if?
All the indicators are pointing to some kind of ground operation being imminent. Not just the comments by Israel's military chief, but the country has put two reserve brigades, mobilised two reserve brigades for operations in the north. As for why, the Israeli government has said it wants to push Hezbollah fighters away from its border and to stop the group from firing into the north of the country. Tens of thousands of Israeli civilians have been forced to move away from the north over the past near year, and Israel wants them to be able to return. But analysts say that goal cannot be achieved by airstrikes alone, and without a diplomatic solution, it makes some kind of land operation all the more likely. But it's really important to remember that Hezbollah is a huge organisation. It has tens of thousands of fighters, a large arsenal of weapons. The last time Israel launched a ground invasion of Lebanon back in 2006, it didn't end well. And there is no guarantee, despite the successes that Israel says it has achieved in the last few days against Hezbollah, there is no guarantee of success from a ground operation this time round.
Deborah, thank you so much for all of your analysis there. Well, we're following all the developments as things continue to escalate here on the ground, and we will continue to do so in the days and weeks to come. But for now, Anna, back to you in the studio.
Yalda, thank you. Keir Starmer has defended his decision to accept a gift of accommodation worth £20,000, saying he did it to help his son. The Prime Minister says he accepted the offer from Lord Ali for a place for his 16-year-old boy to study for his GCSEs, while journalists were outside the family home after the election was called. Keir has been speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, at the UN in New York.
The Prime Minister in New York on the global stage.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. But it's domestic issues defining his premiership so far. You campaigned on a message of change, yet you find yourself caught in a row over the huge amount of freebies you've accepted while leader of the opposition, £107,000, far more than any other MP. Do you acknowledge that this has undermined your message and reputation?
Everything I've had has been declared, and sitting behind the numbers are some human explanations. Some of that money was for the loan of a flat during the election period. No money changed hands.
Yes, and that was related to your son.
We had a situation where the election was called. My son happened to be in the middle of his GCSEs. That means there are a lot of journalists outside the front door. So I said, we're going to get you out of here and get you somewhere where you can just study and get to school and back without having to go through all of that. And that's when someone said, well, in which case I can make this flat available to you. And I wasn't going to let my son fail or not do well in his GCSEs because of journalists outside our front door.
You said in your speech yesterday, it's a shared struggle, a project that says to everyone this will be tough. There will be some people that would also want a different environment where they would like their child to go so they could have a better opportunity. Do you see how it looks to some people that there's one rule for you in terms of being able to claim this stuff that other people don't have access to?
Well, I think that's why the rules are there to declare it. But look, every day...
Do you get it, though?
Every day...
Do you get how it looks?
If you're putting to me, Beth, that I should have stayed in my Kentish Town home and disrupted my son's GCSEs, that was the right thing to do, then I think you should put that to me.
The PM, as tense as we've seen him, defending donations, even as polling shows the public don't like it. So you don't want to change the rules?
I think it's a judgment call for each Member of Parliament.
So you're not going to change the rules, just to be clear, you don't think the rules need reviewing in light of some of the backlash against it? Two-thirds of the public think you should not accept these tickets.
It's a judgment call. In relation to clothing, then I have made the decision that I won't accept donations for clothing. That was something that was done in opposition. We're now in government, so you won't be seeing those declarations.
Okay. Meanwhile, back home, Labour activists are in full rebellion. Conference backing a protest against his cut to the winter fuel payments. Your first conference as Prime Minister, and they have voted you down. It's not just Labour, it's the country that's not with you on this policy. It's bad politics.
Well, I do understand why people are concerned about it, but we inherited a £22 billion black hole. We've taken a decision to deal with it because that will stabilise the economy. I recommit to the triple lock, which means that for pensioners, state pensioners, there was £900 extra this year, 460 predicted next year, and so on and so forth, which is why by stabilising the economy, we can ensure that pensioners are better off with a Labour government.
How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you again.
The PM's focus for now on conflicts abroad, with President Zelenskyy at the UN trying to unlock weapons for Ukraine, while the Middle East remains on the brink. If it's hard back home, there's little respite here.
Well, Beth joins us live now from New York. So he's on the global stage there, Beth, but issues back home continue to follow him.
Yes, that's right. I'm just here outside the United Nations, the Prime Minister today, out on the global stage indeed, meeting President Zelenskyy. He had a meeting with President Macron of France talking about climate change. He addressed the UN Security Council, urging the Middle East to come back from the brink. And tomorrow he's having a breakfast with business leaders, trying to drum up inward investment and get them to come over to the UK for a big investment summit the Chancellor is hosting next month. But yes, he is still bedevilled by domestic difficulties. The winter fuel allowance, his own conference voting against the policy. It's only symbolic, but showing their displeasure on the heels of acute opposition from the unions too, and still rumblings over the levels of gifts he's accepted. In that interview, I sought to put it to him that it might not be, there might be justifications in his mind, but what are the optics of this? I have to say it was one of the tensest interviews I've ever had with the Prime Minister. He seemed very angry about the line of questioning. He obviously said there's human elements to this, these donations and why I've accepted them, referencing his son and some of the decisions he's taken, in part for his family. Now, it's up to you as a viewer to decide whether you think it's on or not. The Prime Minister defending his position, but I think the point in this is that he came into government saying he was going to do things differently and change politics, and there's been questions about what the level of cultural change is if he is perceived to be a Prime Minister taking freebies from rich donors, and is that really a break from the past? That's the accusation levelled against him. He rejects it. I think it's fair to say that he has not shut that line of questioning down in what has been an uncomfortable period for a Prime Minister whose popularity ratings are plummeting with the public.
Beth Rigby, live there at the UN in New York. Thank you. Now, the Ministry of Justice is tonight still looking for a handful of the dozens of prisoners freed by mistake during the emergency release scheme earlier this month. Sky's Molly Malone is here, and this release bypassed the safeguards which had been put in place. Explain more if you can, Molly.
Yeah, that's right. This is the emergency early release scheme used to free up space in overcrowded jails, and it means that certain offenders can be released having served 40% of their sentence. Now, the government put certain exclusions in place. One of those exclusions was those serving sentences for breaching a restraining order should not be released. But what's happened here is that 37 people have been mistakenly released, and it's because of outdated legislation. So there's one set of legislation in 2020 for breaching a restraining order, one in 1997. The exclusions applied to the 2020 legislation, but not to those serving sentences and sentenced under the 1997 legislation, which means that certain people were released because of those exclusions not being in place. Now, the majority of those 37, I understand, have been recalled to custody custody. 5 are still outstanding. The government say they're working urgently with the police to rectify that situation. I also understand that one person did go on to allegedly re-offend, accused of intentionally touching a woman. He was recalled to prison. But clearly this is concerning for victims. The Domestic Abuse Commissioner for England and Wales, Nicole Jacobs, tonight responding to our report in a statement, she said she's deeply concerned to hear that 37 prisoners who were serving sentences for breaching restraining orders were released in error under the SDS 40 early prison release scheme. She went on to say anyone who breaches a restraining order is likely to be a high-risk individual who may be fixated on their victim, undeterred by legal restrictions that have been put in place. So clearly the government say they're working urgently to rectify this situation. Those 5 people still outstanding and haven't been recalled to prison, but clearly concerning for victims and potentially the wider public too.
Molly, thank you. Russia's President Putin has warned the West that allowing Ukraine to use long-range weapons on targets inside Russia could provoke a nuclear response. Mr. Putin says he's revised Russia's military doctrine to allow the threshold allowing the use of nuclear weapons.
The revised version of the document proposes to consider the aggression against Russia by any non-nuclear state, but with the participation or support of a nuclear state as their joint attack on the Russian Federation. We reserve the right to use nuclear weapons in the event of aggression against Russia, including if the enemy, using conventional weapons, creates a critical threat to our sovereignty.
Well, earlier, Ukraine's President Zelenskyy appealed to world leaders to continue to stand with his country in its fight against Russia. He was addressing the UN General Assembly in New York ahead of a meeting with the US President Joe Biden tomorrow, during which he's expected to repeat his call to use long-range weapons against Russia.
Nearly 100 nations and international organizations that have supported the peace formula. It's truly a global community: Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, North America, the Pacific region, all united by the peace formula. And I am glad that the first peace summit was so reminding of the UN General Assembly. Everyone was equal, all nations.
Well, on the ground, the situation is looking increasingly difficult for Ukraine's troops in the east of the country. The Russian advance has intensified over recent months, and in Donetsk Oblast and the Donbas region, Ukrainian forces are struggling to hold their lines. Our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, was given exclusive access to a medical team working on the front line.
As night draws across the Eastern Front, medical teams wait nervously. They know it will be a busy night. Chief Medic Yaroslav takes the call. He's told there are many casualties. It is a race towards the rendezvous point. We film with a night vision camera. Any unnecessary light could draw enemy fire.
The medical evacuation team has just taken its first call of the evening, and we're hurtling now in the dark towards the front lines. Now, they much prefer working at night at the moment because the fighting has become very intense, and the risk of picking up casualties in the daylight and getting spotted and targeted by a drone is often too great.
A few kilometers from the front line and the team stops. Out of the gloom, the first casualties eventually arrive. All look gaunt and shell-shocked. The grime and terror of this grim trench war is written into their faces.
They destroyed the position. With drones, they completely destroyed it. Thank God we survived. One person died, but I was blown away by the explosion. I was lucky.
Ukraine is facing a shortage of manpower. Those at the front are exhausted.
The shrapnel is sticking out of my leg. My leg is swollen and my other leg hurts too. I probably twisted it.
The team moves to a second evacuation point, much closer to the front line. It is an anxious wait in open fields as shells land around us. Eventually, the casualty arrives. There's much more urgency in this extraction. There are 4 more injured men on their way, and the wounded man is in intense pain. Andre is suffering from shrapnel wounds. He's clearly in shock. As they go, his condition is carefully monitored.
He's okay, he's stable, he's heavily wounded, but stable.
It has been a long journey from the front line to the medical facility. But Andre will now get the surgery he needs. For the evacuation team, the nights are intense. There is no end to the casualties. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Eastern Ukraine.
A newly knighted Sir Alan Bates said today his long crusade over the post office is far from over. He threatened legal action over delays in compensation for the Horizon IT scandal. Speaking to Sky News shortly after being knighted by Princess Anne, he accused the government of leaving sub-postmasters at a standstill, a warning that this report from our business correspondent Adele Robinson does contain some flash photography.
History rewriting itself the way it should be.
Sir Alan Bates for services to justice.
Sir Alan Bates, knighted by the Princess Royal for services to justice. 2 decades since he first took on the post office, 2 decades since he was wrongly accused of stealing from them, along with hundreds more victims.
We're accepting this on behalf of the whole group and the suffering everyone's gone through. And if it helps me, take our battle forward, the case that we've still got to fight, then, wonderful. It's great. It's a real honour from that point of view.
Will you be accountable for this, Mrs Venables? It's been 7 months since former Post Office boss Paula Venables was stripped of her CBE. Did you lie to MPs? More than 700 sub-postmasters were falsely accused of theft because of faulty Horizon computer software on her watch.
I'm taking this on behalf of all of the group, then I think we deserve it, unlike she did, and who drove the business into the ground and brought it into such disrepute.
But Sir Alan, being Sir Alan, wants to use his new status to push the government into action on financial redress schemes for victims, with a new deadline of March next year.
Since the new government's come in, I've not heard a word from them about the schemes or anything. There are potential legal avenues we could take, but it's going to then be another year, 18 months for the group. But if we can't get these things resolved shortly, if we can't get a affirmation from them of a March 2025 deadline, then we may as well follow these other routes. And I know we've got the support of the nation behind us. And if we need to fundraise for a court case, we will.
Sir Alan is unsurprisingly yet to finish his fight. He says it's a long route to travel. This medal may help him. Adele Robinson, Sky News, Windsor.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Telegraph's deputy comment editor, Annabel Denham. Among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Telegraph, Israeli boots ready to hit the ground in Lebanon, the paper says. Back with that and more in just a moment.